She looks better this way, Jenna said, her laugh slicing through the chatter like glass. I froze in the doorway, still holding the strawberry cake I'd baked that morning. The candles flickered as the air seemed to vanish from the room. My granddaughter, my Nora, stood beneath the chandelier, her small head completely bald. The light glinted off her bare scalp, pink and raw. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Everyone around me clapped as if nothing were wrong. Owen, my son, was smiling stiffly. His arm looped awkwardly around his wife. He looked at me once, then quickly away. "Don't overreact," Jenna added, swirling her wine. "It's just hair. Just hair." Those two words cracked something deep inside me. Nora fidgeted beside the table, her dress too bright for the hollow look in her eyes. When she finally lifted her gaze to mine, tears shimmered there, silent and ashamed. I set the cake down on the counter and crossed the room, my legs weak. "Sweetheart?" I whispered, crouching in front of her. "What happened?" She swallowed hard, her voice barely a breath. "Mommy said I was ugly with messy hair. So she fixed it." Jenna laughed again, sharp and careless. "You should have seen her face when I turned on the clippers. Dramatic little thing." A few guests chuckled politely. I wanted to scream, but the sound stayed trapped behind my teeth. Instead, I reached for Nora's trembling hand. Her fingers were cold, her skin sticky with cake icing she hadn't eaten. "Grandma," she whispered. "Can I go with you now?" The room spun around me. Balloons, ribbons, laughter, all blurring into noise I couldn't understand. I straightened slowly, keeping my hand on her shoulder. My son was watching, expression blank, and I realized then he wouldn't stop any of this. So I smiled quietly, deliberately, and said, "We'll go soon, my love." That was the moment I knew I wouldn't leave her there again. After the guests left, the house felt hollow balloons, sagging frosting, crusted on paper plates, the smell of wine lingering like regret. I stayed behind, cleaning up crumbs just to keep from looking at my son. Owen avoided my eyes, busy stacking cups that didn't need stacking. "She'll get over it," he muttered. "Kids forget fast." I stopped, a dishcloth clutched in my hand. "Do you even hear yourself?" "She's 6. His shoulders tensed. Jenna didn't mean to hurt her. It was supposed to be a lesson. A lesson. I wanted to shake him, to make him remember the boy who used to cry when his father raised his voice. But the man standing before me was harder, quieter. Married silence had carved out his spine. Jenna appeared in the doorway, lipstick-smudged glass in hand. "You're still upset?" she said, feigning surprise. "You saw her hair always tangled dirty. She hated washing it. I solved the problem. You humiliated her. Oh, come on, Evelyn." She sighed, rolling her eyes. "Don't act like I hurt her. It's just hair. It grows back." Her laughter echoed through the kitchen. I felt something burn in my chest, but I swallowed it down. Fighting her here would change nothing. I found Nora under the dining table, knees pulled to her chest, her doll clutched so tightly the plastic arm was bent backward. The lights had been dimmed, but the sound of Jenna's laughter carried faintly from the patio. My son was out there too, his voice soft, obedient. I crouched beside the table. "Come here, sweetheart." She hesitated before crawling out, eyes red and wide. When I brushed my hand over her scalp, she flinched. My heart dropped. "Let's get you cleaned up." In the bathroom, I sat her on the counter. Tiny scabs ran along her hairline like cruel fingerprints. I wet a cloth and dabbed carefully, trying not to wince. "Does this hurt?" She shook her head, but tears spilled anyway. Mommy used Daddy's machine, the one he uses for his beard. I froze mid-motion. "She used that on you. She said I don't deserve pretty hair because I don't behave." Her voice cracked, barely audible. My chest felt tight, like every breath cut against bone. "Was Daddy there when she did it?" Nora nodded slowly. "He watched TV. He told me not to scream." For a moment I couldn't move. The sink dripped steadily, marking the seconds between disbelief and fury. I wrapped her in a towel and held her close. Her skin was warm and trembling. "Listen to me, my love," I whispered. "Nothing about you is ugly. You hear me?" Nothing. Her small hands clutched at my sleeve. "Can we go home with you, Grandma?" I didn't answer. I just nodded and kept rocking her until her breathing steadied. Later, I tucked her into bed. She fell asleep instantly, one hand still gripping her doll. Outside, Jenna's laughter floated through the night, sharp and careless. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the ceiling until the noise faded. Years of being patient, of minding my place, pressed heavy on my chest. Somewhere deep inside me, something hardened into resolve. By morning, I already knew what I had to do. Morning came heavy and gray. I made coffee, though I barely tasted it, and walked across the street to see Mrs. Donovan. She'd lived next door for 20 years, sensible kind, the sort of woman who always knew more than she said. She opened the door before I could knock. "I was hoping you'd come," she whispered. "I didn't sleep last night." Neither did I. She led me into her kitchen where the smell of toast hung in the air. "Eveline," she began softly, "you need to know this wasn't the first time." My stomach dropped. "What do you mean Jenna's been cutting that child's hair for months? Says it's to teach her manners. Every time Nora talks back or spills something, she cuts a bit more. Yesterday was just the end of it." I gripped the edge of the counter to steady myself. Images flooded in Nora, arriving with uneven bangs saying, "Mommy got mad." I'd brushed it off, thinking it was just an accident. My heart pounded with guilt. She told me at the grocery store, once Mrs. Donovan continued lowering her voice, that modern kids need tougher lessons. I thought she was joking. I nodded, weakly. She wasn't. Back home, I went straight to my study. The old leather notebook from my counseling days sat in the bottom drawer. I opened it, running my fingers over the familiar pages, signs of distress in children, withdrawal, guilt, fear, change in sleep patterns. Nora checked every box. I sat there for a long time, the quiet pressing in. The smell of Jenna's perfume still lingered on Nora's clothes, sickly sweet. I wanted to storm over and tear that house apart, but I knew it would only make things worse. Anger couldn't save Nora. Proof could. I took a deep breath, pulled out my phone, and began making calls. Old colleagues, social workers, anyone who still owed me a favor. By noon, I had the number of someone who might help. The decision felt cold and certain, like a lock clicking shut. I showed up the next morning without calling. Jenna opened the door, a mug of coffee in her hand, and annoyance written across her face. "You again?" "I'm taking Nora to lunch," I said evenly. My tone left no room for argument. She raised an eyebrow. "She's barely awake. Then I'll wake her." Owen was sitting at the table, scrolling through his phone, pretending not to hear. "Fine," he muttered, not looking up. "Be back by dinner." Nora appeared at the top of the stairs, in a wrinkled dress, eyes still puffy from crying. She didn't smile when she saw me, just exhaled softly, like relief itself hurt. I held out my hand. "Come on, sweetheart. Let's get some air." Jenna crossed her arms. "She's grounded." "Then consider this a recess," I said, already walking toward the car. I could feel her glare on the back of my neck as I buckled Nora into the seat. The child didn't ask where we were going until we were halfway down the road. "Will Daddy be mad?" she whispered, touching the bare curve of her head. "Not at you," I said, though. We both knew it was a lie. The drive home was quiet, except for the hum of the tires. When we pulled into my driveway, Nora pressed her face to the window, eyes wide. "Can I really stay here for a while?" I told her. "We'll see." Inside, I made her oatmeal and let her draw at the kitchen table while I worked. I took photos of her scalp, every mark and cut, and wrote down everything she had told me. Then I called a friend, a retired social worker who still picked up when I needed her. "Eveline," she said. After hearing the story, This isn't discipline. It's emotional abuse. I thanked her and hung up my hands, trembling just once before going still. That night, I sat in the quiet, watching Nora sleep in the guest room, her small body curled beneath the blanket. I didn't cry. I couldn't. Something colder had taken its place, a certainty that wouldn't let me stop now. I heard them before I saw them. The sound of Jenna's voice carried through the quiet morning air, sharp and furious. "Open this door right now. You kidnapped my daughter." Through the window, I saw her standing at the gate in her robe, hair, wild eyes blazing. Owen stood a few feet behind, pale and silent, his arms crossed like a man who'd already lost. I stepped to the front door but didn't unlock it. "Nora is safe here," I said. Through the screen. "You have no right," Jenna shouted. "You think you can just take someone's child because you don't like how we parent." "I didn't take her," I said quietly. "I protected her." Jenna's voice broke into a high, frantic pitch. "I'm calling the police." "Do it," I replied. She froze for a moment, not expecting me to agree. Then she grabbed her phone and started dialing. Nora appeared in the hallway, clutching the hem of my sweater. Her small hand trembled against my leg. Minutes later, a patrol car pulled up in front of the house. I opened the door only when the officer approached. He was young, polite, but cautious. "Ma'am, we've had a report of a possible abduction." "Then you should come in," I said. "I have evidence." I laid everything on the table, the photographs of Nora's scalp, the notes I'd written, the time-stamped messages. I called Mrs. Donovan, who arrived in her slippers, confirming what she'd heard and seen. The officer's face changed as he flipped through the pages. He looked from the photos to Nora, who stood silently, her eyes wide. "We'll need to make a report," he said finally. Jenna lunged forward, pointing at me. "You're lying." "You manipulated everyone, ma'am." The officer interrupted, his tone firm now. "You and your husband will need to leave the property until this is reviewed." Jenna's scream split the air as Owen pulled her back toward the car. She kept shouting until the doors slammed and the sound of the engine faded. Nora pressed her face into my dress and whispered, "Is it over?" "Not yet," I said, resting my hand on her back, "but it's starting." That night, I couldn't sleep. Every sound outside the window felt sharper than usual. The wind brushing against the fence, the hum of passing cars, even the creak of the old floorboards beneath my feet. My body was still, but my mind refused to rest. I kept thinking of Jenna's face at the gate, twisted with rage. Nora stirred in the guest bed beside mine. A small whimper escaped her lips, followed by a rush of tears. I reached for her, pulling her close. "It's all right, sweetheart. You're safe here." Her breath hitched. She said next time she'll cut my eyelashes. The words sliced through me. I pressed her head against my chest, whispering, "No one is going to touch you again." But in the quiet, even I wasn't sure if my voice sounded certain. When she finally drifted back to sleep, I sat upright, listening to the clock tick. The fear wasn't just for Nora, it was the creeping dread that the world might still decide I was wrong. Parents had rights, and sometimes the law loved words like misunderstanding. Just after midnight, I gave up trying to stay calm and reached for the phone. Daniel picked up on the second ring. "Eve, it's late," he said, his voice rough with sleep. "I need help," I whispered. "I think they'll try to take her back." He didn't ask for details. He'd known me long enough to hear what wasn't said. "You did the right thing. We'll file for a temporary protection order first thing in the morning. I'll take care of it." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe the truth would be enough. But as I hung up, the silence pressed down again, thick, waiting, familiar. I looked over at Nora, her small hand still clutching the blanket, and wondered how anyone could see her as anything but fragile. I brushed my thumb over the faint line of stubble on her scalp. Outside, a dog barked once far away, then stopped. The house went still again, and I sat there awake until the first light of dawn touched the curtains. A week later, I sat in the cold, windowless courtroom, my palms pressed flat against my skirt to keep them from shaking. The air smelled faintly of paper and disinfectant sterile, detached, like the people deciding our fate couldn't possibly imagine what had happened behind closed doors. Jenna sat 2 rows ahead, her hair perfectly ironed, her suit immaculate. She looked like the picture of composure, but I could see the tightness around her mouth. Owen sat beside her, his shoulders hunched, staring at the floor. He hadn't looked at me since the hearing began. Daniel stood tall at the table, his tone calm but firm as he presented the evidence. He held up the photographs of Nora's head, the documentation of every bruise and cut, every witness statement. Each page felt like a wound reopening. When it was Nora's turn to speak, the courtroom seemed to shrink. The judge leaned forward slightly, his pen stilled. Nora's voice trembled as she said, "Mommy told me I'm ugly." The words hung there heavy and final. Even the court reporter paused typing. I saw Owen lift his head, his eyes glassy with disbelief. Jenna's jaw tightened, but she didn't turn around. I clenched my hands together to stop them from trembling. There was no joy in hearing my granddaughter speak those words, only sorrow that a child so small already understood humiliation. Daniel placed a gentle hand on my shoulder as the judge began to speak. His voice was steady, almost kind. Temporary custody is granted to Mrs. Carrington until further evaluation. The parents are to attend mandatory therapy and parenting classes. I exhaled slowly, not in relief, but in something close to mourning. As we stood to leave, Jenna brushed past me, her perfume sharp, her whisper sharper. "You stole my family." I met her eyes, calm and unwavering. "I saved mine." She blinked, stunned, but said nothing. Outside, the sky was white with early winter light. I reached for Nora's hand. She didn't speak, but her fingers tightened around mine as we stepped toward the courthouse doors, ready to face whatever came next. The weeks blurred together in quiet rhythms, mornings with cereal and crayons, evenings filled with bedtime stories. Nora began to laugh again, soft at first, then bright like the sound of sunlight on glass. Every night before she slept, I warmed a little coconut oil between my palms and massaged her scalp. The tiny golden fuzz that had started to grow shimmered under the lamp. "This is how brave girls heal," I told her once. "They grow stronger after the storm." She smiled, her eyes half closed. "Like me. Exactly like you." Sometimes she'd fall asleep before I finished the story, her breathing steady, her head resting in my lap. It was in those quiet hours that I let the fear slip out, the worry that even though she was safe, something inside her might always remember. Owen began calling after the first week. His voice sounded hollow, stripped of excuses. "I was blind, Mom. I thought I was keeping the peace, but I was just keeping quiet. I listened, but didn't promise forgiveness." Silence was the only answer that felt honest. Then one afternoon, a letter arrived. No return address, but I recognized the handwriting immediately, neat, deliberate, too careful. "I'm sorry for what I did. Thank you for saving me from myself." I read it twice, maybe 3 times, then folded it neatly and placed it in the drawer beside my bed. I didn't respond. Some wounds didn't need words. That night, Nora drew a picture for me, a woman with gray hair and a little girl with a golden crown. "That's us," she said proudly. I laughed softly. "I don't wear a crown." "Yes, you do," she said. "You just can't see it." Her innocence still startled me, fragile and bright. I kissed her forehead and turned off the light. Outside, the wind moved through the trees, gentle this time, almost forgiving. A year passed before I realized how much had changed. The garden was alive again. Roses climbing the fence, children's laughter spilling through the open gate. I'd strung paper lanterns across the trees, and their glow flickered like warm memories finally made kind. Nora stood in the center of it all, a small white cake before her 7 candles burning bright. Her golden hair had grown back curling softly around her shoulders. When she bent to blow out the flames, she looked up at me and whispered, "Grandma, I'm not scared anymore." The words caught me off guard. I smiled and touched her cheek, letting that truth settle between us like sunlight. Around us, her friends clapped, shouting her name, the sound of pure joy, cutting clean through the ghosts of what once had been. Owen stood near the fence, watching quietly. He didn't try to speak, didn't move closer, but when our eyes met, I saw something new, humility, maybe even peace. The man who once stayed silent now carried the weight of his own awakening. Behind him, the driveway was empty. Jenna hadn't come, though I heard she was still in therapy trying to rebuild her life piece by piece. When the guests left and the lights dimmed, Nora curled up beside me on the porch steps, icing smudged on her nose. The night air was soft, carrying the faint hum of crickets and the sweetness of celebration. "I made a wish," she said. "What did you wish for?" She smiled, half sleepy. "That we never have to leave this house." I wrapped my arm around her. "You're safe now." "My love," I whispered. Later, after I tucked her into bed, I stood in the doorway for a long time. The faint echo of laughter from her 6th birthday still lived somewhere inside me, but it no longer hurt. It had softened, become something else. Something almost kind. The night was quiet again, and for the first time in a long while, it felt like peace was finally staying.